Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to a special meeting for the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. We'll first begin by inviting you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Safety First minute is just along the line of doing our respective part in keeping our social distancing and also being mindful to clean surfaces after we've used them and to be cognizant of going the extra mile. I think unfortunately we're all starting to find somebody that we've known that is becoming infected and some that I know in one case of mine, they're unfortunately seriously ill. And so as we do our part, it's important to be extra mindful and watchful and to follow the guidance that's given to us. Let's go to item 4, which is a temporary service modification approval. And we'll go to Carolyn Gannott, our executive director, and then and her staff to have a presentation.
Good morning. Just want to start off this presentation by saying that, many of the transit agencies across the country are seeing ridership fall as there's more stay-at-home calls for staying at home, shelter in place. We're not alone in the sense that our ridership has gone down. We did do a report on the Wednesday meeting that our ridership levels have been down. Eddie Cummins, the Chief Operating Officer, will go over that a little bit today, and then Eric Kelson will go over some of the modifications that we'll be doing. And the purpose of those service modifications, and if we could go to the next slide. What we're really trying to do, and the team has been great at doing that, is into keeping in mind all the key objectives. One is to make sure, do you have? Oh.
If we can turn around if we need to. I just didn't know if there was an easy switch to flip on or.
Oh, turn it on.
Go ahead though, Carolyn, it'll come on. Technical expertise there we go.
So there are 3 key objectives that we really are trying to balance when we're doing these service modifications, and the reasons why we feel like we need to do them at the time. Right now, we do have fiscal responsibility in the terms of that we're running a lot of service right now that is very, very underutilized. And so we have been really studying over the last couple of weeks and where we're seeing the service riderships go down and those needs. But at the same time, we need to actually continue to provide service to those who need to travel to their jobs or to essential trips. The second thing is we really want to still focus on our workforce retention. That's important to us. We don't want to lay off a lot of workers right now. We want to keep them occupied. There's plenty of things to continue to do, but at the same time, we want to limit their hours of exposure out on the street. So we're continuing to develop a service modification plan that sort of balances all those while still providing an essential service to people so they still can travel. So I'm going to have Eddie go over, so I just actually one more thing. So today, the required board action is to delegate authority to myself, the executive director, to implement necessary temporary service modifications through the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery. We don't know how long that will be. We're hoping it will be short, but we have no idea in these times. So I'll move over to Eddie right now so he can talk a little bit about the ridership trends, and then Eric on the types of modifications that we will be doing.
Thank you. Good morning. It's loud. So our COVID-19 effects on ridership has been substantial. It's been well reported. We've talked about it several times. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we carried nearly 169,000 riders per day. Today, we're carrying about 59,000. That's a 65% decrease in ridership system-wide. And I have a few slides that I'd like to show that kind of show this decline in ridership by mode. This is a fixed route bus. There's some key points in time on here is identified by the yellow dots. You can see March 11th up there, which was the day that everything really started to escalate quickly. And then you have the day of the earthquake, which was, had some impact on some of our modes. You can see fixed route bus ridership has declined about 61%. But as you also see, the earthquake had minimal effect on our bus ridership. Frontrunner is up next. Frontrunner ridership has declined by 77%. As you can see, our commuters, a lot of people, as Carolyn alluded to, working from home. So our commuter ridership has really declined substantially over time. And there was a moderate effect of the earthquake on Frontrunner as that was running at reduced speeds most of the day. Light rail ridership is down 64%, and the earthquake day had a dramatic impact on that because we have power outages throughout the system, and that system was down the vast majority of the day. I think we got up and running around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Paratransit ridership, this is our largest decline by just a little bit, but our paratransit ridership decline is down 78%, and obviously it was a dramatic impact of the earthquake that there were very few trips that were taken that day as we were in recovery mode. UVX ridership is down 73%, very little impact of the earthquake, but we have seen a slight, just kind of a steady decline in that ridership over the past several days. And then this is just kind of a summary that outlines everything, shows by mode what normal weekday ridership was prior to the decline, our most current day of ridership, and then the percent. Again, if you add all of those up, we're at about a 65% decrease in ridership. As you know, we've made a few adjustments to date. We suspended routes to our closed work activity centers. Those was Route 606 and 608 was their primary responsibility. We suspended or reduced routes to closed ski resorts. That was 674, 675, 677, 880. And then we reduced to just 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. trips on the 953, 972, and 994. We also suspended routes or trips to closed schools. That affected the 650, the 919, the 920. We had some helper trips on the 455, 473, 626, excuse me, 627, 640, 841, and then we had select trips, kind of helper trips on the red line to support the university. And so as we've continued to monitor this situation, watching the ridership, watching the situation as things have changed daily, it's really become obvious that some additional service modifications are required. And to kind of provide some of those details, I wanted to turn it over to Eric Callison. He's manager of service planning. He's been working with our planners throughout this process, done a tremendous amount of work. Just have him kind of share some of the details of these plan modifications. Eric?
So I just want to, before we explain this, I just want to recognize the heroic work that all of our planners at UTA have been doing the last couple of weeks. We've compressed a 4-month change day process into a week and a half. So please be kind to the operations planners in your life. They have had a hard time this week. They've done a lot of extra work and we appreciate them stepping up. As we've looked at how to modify the service in response to the current ridership and economic situation, our priority has been to maintain the hours of service on as many routes as we can to ensure that people can still get to work or make essential trips. But we are reducing the frequency on most of the routes. The only routes that we're actually suspending are some commuter routes that have alternative service nearby. Some of these routes we've seen single-digit ridership numbers per day for the last few days, and it doesn't really make sense to continue running them until conditions return more or less to normal. So just to give you a brief overview, on weekdays, as I said, we'll maintain the span of service on most routes. We'll adjust the frequency of service on 15 and 30-minute bus routes. So 15-minute bus routes will come every 30 minutes, 30-minute bus routes will come every 60 minutes. In general, there are a couple of exceptions to that. UVX will go from 6 minutes at peak to 15 minutes all day. And again, some commuter bus routes where there's alternative service will be suspended. Light rail will move from 15-minute headways all day to 30 minutes, and commuter rail will move from 30 minutes to 60 minutes on weekdays. Any questions about that?
No, the one question I have on the light rail, because as I was looking through the slides, it said something from 20 to 30. Is that on the Saturday service?
That's on weekends, yes.
Okay. Oh, I see. That's the change notion. Okay, thank you.
So on Saturdays, we will move light rail frequency from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. Commuter rail will remain at 60-minute service. There will be a couple of alterations to late night trips that return to the yard, but in general, the service will be maintained. And then on the bus side, the only thing that's changing is that the routes that currently come every 15 minutes on Saturdays will run every 30 minutes. All other routes will retain their same Saturday schedule. That includes UVX, which currently runs every 15 minutes on Saturdays. It will continue to run every 15 minutes, but everything else will be bumped down to 30 minutes. Then on Sundays, bus routes will retain their normal Sunday schedule, which is every 30 or 60 minutes. Light rail will again move from 20-minute frequency to 30 minutes, and commuter rail does not run on Sundays. I should also mention on weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, paratransit will continue to run. This is considered a temporary service modification and does not affect the paratransit service area. So anywhere that a paratransit trip is available on any day of the week now, it will still be available. Also, the microtransit pilot in South Salt Lake County will continue to run, but with a reduced complement of vehicles and with slightly longer wait times in order to facilitate social distancing between microtransit passengers. There'll be a little bit lower rate of trip sharing just to make sure everybody can maintain that distance. So just to kind of illustrate that, we have just these maps at a high level. As was mentioned earlier, the detailed information about these routes will be available next Tuesday. We'll have the schedules and we'll have trip planning available on the website at that time. You can see in Weber and Davis, Box Elder County area, the kind of core area of the service is maintained. There's a few commuter routes in Southern Davis County, as well as the ski routes that are not running at this time already, but the rest of the routes will be in service on reduced frequencies. Any questions about the northern area map?
Can I ask a general question and then, so will the transit app itself be updated as well during this period of time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, by next week it should have the correct information.
Beth.
Thank you. I did have another question about that, but thanks. That was one of my questions, is how are we going to communicate this out to the ridership that still exists? The other question that I had is, there are obviously riders who do not have maybe the technology advantages of just looking at an app, and how are we going to communicate that to them? I say that because I spoke to the mayor of Ogden yesterday, and he indicates to me that he has public works people that aren't really doing a lot and they'd be happy to help with signs or do something else. And so if there is that opportunity, or if there's something that we're doing, please, I think he would be thrilled to reach out and help with that effort.
So speaking to our PR department this morning, I know we are planning some outreach similar to what we did for August 2019 Change Day, with signs on buses and also at key bus stops. And so I think that's definitely something that we could coordinate, but we'll work through our PR department on that, exactly how those signs get out. But we do have a plan for communicating with our customers that don't have access to technology as well.
Thank you.
Right, then moving on to Salt Lake and Tooele counties, we will be preserving most of the service to Tooele just because there is no alternative for riders from Tooele. And almost all of the line haul service will be preserved in Salt Lake County. There's just a few commuter routes that will not be running. You can see in the yellow there.
Can you give me an example of one of those commuter routes that just went dead, basically?
Sure. So you can kind of see on Highland Drive, 2000 East towards the south end of the county, we have, there's a blue line and a yellow line on there. The blue line is Route 220, which is a 15-minute bus route. That'll go to 30 minutes. And the yellow line is Route 320, which is a fast bus that runs from Sandy to downtown during rush hour. On Tuesday this week, Route 320 carried a total of 7 passengers. on Wednesday, it carried a total of 10. So that's especially where we already have another service running on that corridor every 30 minutes. It just doesn't make sense to continue running that in addition to the local service.
Sure, thank you.
And then in Utah County, kind of the same idea. We will be preserving the Route 805. That's the only route that serves Santaquin. We do have a couple of the fast buses in the north end of the county that have seen enormous ridership declines. Those are primarily the ridership that we get on those routes is to UVU, which is not in session in person. So it's kind of the same idea. We've preserved the local service, and there's a couple of fast buses that have dropped off. Any questions about Utah County? Okay. So, let's see. So I don't know if you want me to take this part, Eddie, or if you're, okay.
You don't want to show the maps of the frequency?
Well, we can.
Yeah, I think it would be
Okay.
good to see that.
All right.
Sorry.
We went back and forth on this, but this is just the same map that has frequencies on it. So green, which you will only see once in this entire exercise, is every 15 minutes. Blue is every 30 minutes. Yellow is every 60. And red is peak only service. So in Weber and Davis counties, the only routes that will be coming every 30 minutes are the 603, 612, and 470. And then everything else will be running on a reduced schedule, 60 minutes-ish.
Eddie, or Eric, we a year or so ago, we entered into an agreement with Salt Lake City. How does this affect that agreement, and subsequently, how does that affect their compensation to us?
So we're going to work through those details. As we put the plan together, we didn't look at any specific, agreement that would, sway our judgment one way or the other. We looked at the system as a system-wide.
Okay.
And then we will be tracking, what reductions are there. And then we'll work through that process in the future.
Yeah, what we're actually, conversations with them will be that we have that we are designing the system holistically, looking at, we're not trying to figure out what agreements we have and
Sure.
equity issues around the money right at this point.
Sure.
But what we are looking at, at the same time, we're probably going to see Salt Lake City with some reductions in their revenue as well in terms of what they're getting. So we don't know how long this will go. We'll continue to monitor it. It is temporary service reductions. We'll continue to work with them. They're understanding about this right now. They understand we're going to reduce the service, and so we've been working with them, and they're in this with us and working with us.
I spoke with the mayor a couple days ago and just chatted, and she certainly is understanding. I just wondered how the mechanics.
We're going to monitor it, and we'll know sort of where the reductions in service are, and then we'll work out something, as it goes forward, and we'll see what their revenue is.
Sure.
It may just end up being a wash somewhere around there.
So that's on weekdays in the north part of our system. Saturdays, the system is mostly the same. Most of the routes up here run on weekdays and Saturdays. The only difference is we will be preserving some peak hour service on weekdays on routes 472 and 473 that doesn't run on Saturdays. And then on Sundays, we just run the 3 routes in this region, 603, 612, 470. They'll continue to run on their current Sunday schedule. In Salt Lake County, we will, as I mentioned, be preserving service from Tooele County. We'll also be running the Park City service and the worker trips on Route 953 that serve Little Cottonwood Canyon. Other than that, it's basically the line haul service will run on reduced frequencies. Same thing on Saturday. And on Sunday, we'll be running the current Sunday network.
Can I ask a question? What peak service do you have on Sundays? I guess I wasn't, is that still just the Park City route?
It's Park City, and then
still
the
for
helper
the-
trips to the ski resorts, and then also Route 551 to the International Center, which serves Amazon and a couple other offices that are still doing great business right now. So, and then in Utah County, we can see UVX is still going to run every 15 minutes. and then everything else will run on reduced frequencies. We are preserving some peak hour service from the south end of the county on weekdays. Then on Saturdays, it will be our regular line haul service. And on Sundays as well, routes 850 and 871 will continue to run more or less on their current schedules.
So as we look at next steps, employee communication is ongoing. Throughout this situation, we've done our best to communicate with employees, and we will continue to do so throughout this process. Public and rider communication is in progress. Social media and website announcements will go out today. Trip planning will be available on March 31st. Route schedules will be posted on the UTA website as soon as possible. Shift bid for our operators will begin on Sunday, March 29th, and service changes will be implemented on Sunday, April 5th. This doesn't click the slide. So the request of the board today is to delegate authority to the executive director to implement the necessary temporary service modifications through the COVID-19 pandemic and recovery. And with that, we'd be happy to open it up for any questions you may have.
I do just want to say one thing about the workforce right now. They have been really out there working right now as we have these schedules. They are completely working with us through this process, understand what's going on. We're very lucky our workers are coming to work. That's not the case in many transit agencies in the country right now. Some of them are suspending service just because they don't have the workforce coming in. And so I commend, all of UTA for everything they're doing. And I just really want to thank and just let you know that the workforce is here for you and to deliver the service that we need to the residents and commuters in this county.
And at this point, Carolyn, we're not looking at any reduction in workforce, and we think our schedules are such that at least they'll be able to continue working.
They can continue working. We have, Eddie, you want to explain how that might be done? Because we really are also trying to limit the hours that they're out there.
Sure.
So this is kind of a unique situation, and every business unit's just slightly different, right? Because they're running a different amount of service, they have a different number of operators, so everything's a little different, but we do have a consistent philosophy in how we're doing the bid and how we're cutting the work. And essentially, the way it works mostly is that operators would work like a 3 and 2, meaning that they'd work 3 days, 8-hour days, right? Be out driving in the system as they normally would, and then they would have 2 report shifts, right? And that way they come in and they would be able to fill in any gaps of, if we had operators calling sick or something of that nature. So it's kind of a 3 and 2 type operation to keep people gainfully employed. As we go through this process and we determine, kind of where we're at, what's going on, we get into our battle rhythm, so to speak, then I think we can start to look at some training, additional training and things like that we'd like to get done and take advantage of that situation for that.
Sure. Let me go to the board if they have, I didn't want to cut you off. Okay. Let me go to the board if they have questions. Beth.
I did have a question or two, thank you. One of the things that I was curious about is if we do this type of a service change, and you've done a commendable job of getting the planners to change these types of routes, what would that look like for our regular, what we call our April change day and our August change days? How does that integrate? I mean, that might be getting a little bit ahead, but I was just curious how that would work.
So April 5th is April change day. So we're going to implement this temporary modification on April change day, and the current April change day schedules will be suspended for as long as they need to be. And if we're still in this situation where we're running a reduced service by August change day, the same thing. We will just have to kind of see what situation we're in as we get closer to August change day, to see whether or not we would return to our previous level of service, our regular level of service, or whether we implement the same reduced service or whether we make adjustments to it. So we're just kind of staying ready, I guess, to see what kind of service modifications will be necessary down the line. But until further notice, the April change day schedules won't be in place. It'll just be this service modification protocol for the foreseeable future.
I think it's important that we stay flexible through this situation. One thing that we've learned throughout this pandemic is that things change quickly. And so I think that we have to remain super flexible throughout this entire time frame.
Right, and as we start these service modifications, we would be tweaking if we need to, and we'll make that, if it just seems that we need to change the span of service or something else is necessary for essential trips, we will probably tweak the schedule as needed.
We're also working very closely with the PR department to make sure that if anything does need to be announced, that gets out to the public in time, in case there are additional adjustments that need to be made at any point.
And do you have a question?
Well, that was the question that I had, is how will this impact the regularly scheduled change days? So that was the one question that I had. Now, down in Utah County, the changes seem to be pretty much in line with the current ridership, because that the ridership there has been so seriously impacted because of UVX and the closure of the two universities. So I'm even surprised that you're going to try to maintain the 15-minute headways on UVX.
We'll give it a shot.
This is one of
Make
those that
adjustments.
we'll watch it and see what happens over a period of time, and we may have to make some additional changes.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
And I think we all remain optimistic. Say in 60 or 90 days, life starts to roll back to normal, and it's probably more of a rolling than on and off kind of thing. But is there a scenario where then you can start to ramp up service, or do you have to sort of pick a interim change day to go back? Have you been able to even think that far down the road?
So just keep in mind that this is something new, right? This isn't something we've experienced before, you know, the way that we're cutting the work, the way we're doing the shift bid, those types of things. I think I'll feel much more comfortable once we get in our battle rhythm of running this new service plan. But I think that there's potential that with the way that we're doing it, with working the 3 days and then the 2 report shifts, so to speak, I think that may provide us a little bit of flexibility. So let's say that something opens back up and we need to, you know, add service back in, you know, I think that there's a good chance that we would have those report operators available to be able to run that service. And so again, no commitments on that, just, you know, we got to get into our battle rhythm and see how this all works out. But I think that there is a chance, and that was one of the things that I asked these planners to do, was to really try to build in as much flexibility as possible as we work through this process, because we know things are going to change. That's one thing that we've learned throughout this process, is that things will change daily, and we just need to be nimble and flexible.
So one of the things on the fiscal side is where we potentially will see savings. Did you talk about this? Is primarily in not scheduled overtime and fuel and any other wear and tear. Do you want to?
Right, I can speak to that a little bit. And so as you look at it, you know, as Carolyn said, you know, we want to be fiscally responsible, but we also want to maintain our workforce. And so the wages are, you know, it's a cost, right? We're going to try to maintain that. Our ability to save during this time frame really comes down to fuel and overtime. So we have, you know, in our normal day-to-day operations, we have overtime built into the day-to-day schedule because it just works, right? And then there's times that, you know, things ramp up and you have to pay overtime. And so we have a budgeted overtime amount in each of our business units. So there's the ability to save some money in that area. And then, of course, fuel. We're going to reduce, you know, miles by, you know, roughly probably 40%. And so obviously you can do the calculation there. I think overall, if everything went right, we'd have the ability to save about $4 million if we looked at this going from April to June.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to grant, and not that you couldn't come back, but I was thinking of a period of about 90 days, grant temporary or authorization to the executive director to make whatever adjustments necessary. But I'd certainly look to my colleagues if you have differing opinions or thoughts.
No, I think it'd be appropriate to make a motion that we revisit this after 60 or 90 days and give Carolyn the authority to make the service modifications and adjustments that may be necessary as we go through this for a period of, say, 60 days, knowing that 30 days from now, we're going to be a lot smarter than we are right now, and we can always revisit this. But I think we ought to give a long enough window to make it viable, but not perhaps open-ended forever.
Do you think 60 days is sufficient?
I wouldn't have any trouble with 90 days. I mean, we're already the 1st of April, so April, May, and June, and revisit this in June sometime. And maybe even before then, depending on how this
Right.
whole thing
I'll
runs
be-
out.
Sure.
I will be continuing to give you the updates if we're making service tweaks. You'll know through our board meetings or through other communications. We'll get
Well,
to you as well.
this happens to be a pretty hot topic, so we will be very interested in these reports almost every board meeting, how we're
Yes.
doing.
Yes,
So
we'll give.
so
we
we'll
will-
know.
We will provide ridership reports each meeting. We can do that in terms of where we are with the new service, and then we won't know the next board meeting because it'll only be implemented for 3 days. But we might have some information then, and then we can continue to report it at each board meeting
certainly.
and any tweaks we're making.
I think 90 days would be a good way to kind of give them the opportunity, like Eddie was saying about the operators bidding on the new scheduling and having all of that be implemented. And again, recognizing that you could come and let us know at any time, should there be any other dramatic changes. But I'd feel comfortable doing a 90 days, giving them the opportunity to get this into place, to see what this results in, and then reporting back as necessary.
Well, let's try this then. I'll make a motion that we delegate temporary authority to our executive director to make the necessary service modification changes for a period of 90 days, during which time we will have an opportunity to review how well we do. But I'll make a motion that we extend that authority to the executive director to make the necessary service modifications to our system.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, and thanks to, I realize behind you virtually are a series of staffs in each of your operating units and your planning units, and Carolyn with your staff that have gone into this. It's been a lot of work without question.
Yeah, I
so.
think everybody in the agency, all the executive leadership team, and particularly planners, have been working on this and engaged one way or another. So we still got a lot of work to do the next
Yeah, I was
week and
going
a
to
half,
say,
2
our
weeks.
communications folks and others are,
Yes.
as well as your staffing, scheduling folks, got a lot of work to do, so.
Now, given these changes that have been outlined, do we have say a small one-page summary of those? The reason I ask that is that we have individually contacted a very significant number of mayors, commissioners, legislators in our service area. And it would be nice if we were able to then get to them some kind of, because we've already alerted them that these changes were coming, if we could then get to them and say, here are the changes that we expect to be in place. If we could get a one-page summary of what you've outlined, Eric, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so
and
we
could send it
have
out to
a
everybody.
one-page summary that'll go out, one to employees today, probably one to the connected to yours, but of course, all the changes can't be done in a one page, so
Oh,
we'll each
sure,
give you
sure.
we'll
Sure.
give you as soon as possible the finalized schedules.
Well,
for
but
you also to
we could
share.
at least say to them, 30 minutes are going to go to 60 minutes, 15 going to 30.
Similar
that
to what
kind
we
of
had
thing.
on the slides, we'll include information about that into
Yes.
that so that you're able to get that to everybody.
And then the detailed by route is going to be another week or so. But we could at least alert people, these are the changes to expect.
Exactly. We'll
I'd
have
like-
that out today.
I'd like to suggest, at least when you give it to us individually based on our respective areas, that the map that you had, I thought was fantastic, Eric.
Yes.
What I'd like to see is what does that route correlate to for that service, whether it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes? Like if it's the 470, what is that? Can you identify that on that same map? I think that would be fantastic.
Okay, we'll see if we can add route numbers to that.
Thanks.
Any other items? I understand our item number 6 is not needed anymore, and so if did you have anything? Ken? Okay, so that'll just our next meeting will then be on April the 8th. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you.